Let's review the Data Quality Dashboard Detailed Score. The detailed score is a way to measure that there is a sufficient amount of detail given to the vendor and employee names in data submitted to Transparent Utah. We check both the expenditure transactions and the payroll transactions to generate a composite score. We would expect that most data should be given a sufficient level of detail. What we're looking for is to not have too many vendors or employees that have the name not applicable or not provided. To see how these scores are calculated, go to the Pay Vendor Employee Name Analysis report by clicking this link or selecting it in the Jump To section. When we get here, there's a lot going on, so let's break it all down. We're able to look at this tree map by either frequency or net amount. We're also able to filter by specific transaction types. In most cases, revenue is not needed because that score is not calculated. We're mostly looking at the expenditure and payroll amounts. These three boxes show the total amount of monies that are not provided, not applicable, or other, respectively. The goal is to have mostly everything in this other category and have less in the not applicable and not provided areas, because these do not give any detail as to who the vendor or employee is. The tree map below illustrates a part-to-whole comparison. The idea is that this is your total expenditures, and we can see in this case that almost half of it is classified not applicable. And another sizable chunk is not applicable payroll expense. So this is a legitimate usage of not applicable and doesn't hurt the detailed score. We would, however, expect more of the expenditures present to be here. This is $440 million worth of transactions that are not given any detail as to who the vendor was. Payroll looks fairly good over here. Depending on the entity type, we would expect a few employees to be not provided or protected, but we can see that mostly all the detail is given, so this is a great score. In the table below, we can see the net amount, the frequency, and the net amount percentage for each of these categories and transaction types. Below, we have a benchmark comparison. The benchmark comparison is where the score is actually calculated from. In this instance, we're looking at the expenditure, and we're looking at the other column. We expect the other column to be high if the entity has a sufficient amount of detail, because if it is high, that means not provided and not applicable are low. And in our entity, we can see that for the given following fiscal years, what net amount percentage was in the category of other, meaning there was detail given. We can see in 2014, a fairly high amount of detail was provided, over 80%, and the same thing in 2021. However, in the middle years here, it appears there was a lack of detail provided. These bands correspond to other entities of a similar size and government type, and what their scores were for these fiscal years. So in our test city, we can see that they were well below the median. The median is this dotted line right here. The green is everything above the median to the max. The yellow band represents the 25th percentile to the median, and the red represents the minimum to the 25th percentile. Everything in the green will earn a score of 1, everything in the yellow will earn a score of 0.5, and everything in the red will earn a score of 0. We can see here that for all these fiscal years, our test city is not earning any good scores, because they've provided a fairly poor level of detail to their transactions. The way for this entity to improve its score is to resubmit reports and provide actual detail as to who the vendor is in its expenditure transactions. This will dramatically improve this entity's score. The goal is to get above this median because that means the entity is providing a fairly high amount of detail compared to its fellow entities.